Well, welcome to 2026 Analysts Gone Wild. We're on episode 42, and it's January. Wow, last year flew by so quick, but we learned a lot. We learned from our audience. We learned from each other. We learned from the stories. There's a lot going on with innovation. Lots of times, I think is innovation caught up with the customer or vice versa? We'll talk about things like that today, and got a lot of great stories. I'm Robert Kramer with more insights and strategy. Let's go around the horn, what everybody's up to and how their year's been started. Let's go, Michael. Tell us a little bit about this year, and you excited about it? How's it? How was your house?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's actually been, it was fairly busy for which is not a bad thing, by the way. But yeah, no, I'm excited about this year. I think there's a lot of stuff going on. It's certainly not a boring time to be in this world that we're in, and trying to keep up with everything. But yeah, actually, I even managed to publish a second book over the holidays, just a companion for the first one, a readiness assessment guide that we've been working on for a bit. So yeah, good stuff. Got a bunch of good episodes of my Disambiguation podcast lined up for the next few weeks. Some interesting interviews, and trying to focus a lot on vertical AI and some of the interesting use cases that are developing. So yeah, fun stuff. I'm excited about the year. I think it's going to be a big one for us.
Good. So we're not going to go back. We're not going to go back to the phones with the cord and fax machines, right? Where business was a little easier. We're going to keep on developing these phones and social media, and make sure it's as hard as it can be to communicate with people. So anyways, Donald, tell us a little bit about yourself and how was your year?
Yeah, my year last year was super busy, I have to say. My year this year is also starting, to be quite busy. And I can already see a difference in that the calls I'm fielding this year, the conversations I'm having are much more focused on real execution, very, very pragmatic. Last year, I seemed to spend a lot of time explaining things, giving people background, trying to get their heads around, how this was actually going to work for them. There were a lot of concerns. And this year, it's very pragmatically focused. We actually want to implement this project. Give us your advice on the deployment, give us a deployment advice on staffing, training, all the things they need to do to go into production. It's very clear that's a focus this year, which makes it very exciting.
Is that because the customer's getting more of an understanding of the innovation? Because I think that their kind of innovation's a little bit ahead of where the customers are at. Do you see that gap closing?
Yeah, there's, last year there was certainly a kind of fear of missing out. There was some FOMO, but there was more fear than missing out. And this year, people have kind of got over that. And I think the fact that the innovation is ahead of them, in some ways, is encouraging, because they can see that there's still space for them to grow into, so they don't feel that they don't feel that they're necessarily behind the curve. There was that thing that came out from, I can't remember, it was Harvard Business School last year, about how 95% of AI projects fail, or fail to get into production. And that actually, to many of my clients, that was a great comfort. We're not the only ones who are failing at this,
Exactly.
The data, actually, I interviewed the CDO of Salesforce about a month ago, and we talked a lot about data strategies and what's going on with data. He's basically like, no one's data is fulfillingly populated the right way. There's problems around everywhere within these data components, and the strategies aren't even on target. So when you look at AI execution, how could it be done right if there's holes everywhere?
That's a huge thing, yeah.
Yeah. And so, Ken, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well.
Yeah.
I'm to just kind of kick in on this 2026 theme. For me, 2025 was a lot about building. It was a lot about laying down infrastructure for myself and the work that I wanted to do moving forward. So I'm really considering 2026 to be organized around execution. So I'm on the third year of my podcast, Esoteric Curiosities, and I'm planning on doing an upgrade on that with both the episodes as well as the materials that support it. I'm going to be releasing a number of new products, including an online training offering. So I'm really pretty chuffed about where things are and what the arc is for the upcoming year.
Great. Sam, it was interesting. You had I guess a little cartoon today about ERP, and it talks about, how happy everybody is when they first sign, and then, kind of start the process. And then, it gets great. The whole, it's great until you get to the change management part, and everybody starts yelling at each other. So, it's really interesting. Just how that was all put together, but change management is such a gigantic part of probably what you do and how you position success, and the transparency of that is, I guess, a gigantic part. So how's that going to change for 2026? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 2026 is going to be very interesting. By the way, Happy New Year, everybody. So 2026, in my mind, if I look at that cartoon right now, it's only going to be faster and more chaotic with the AI speed. That's how we see it, because obviously there is a lot of marketing blending happening right now. And it only causes confusion among customers. And that's what we are experiencing in 95% stat that Donald had mentioned. I don't know if we can go any further than that, but I mean, it's probably going to be fairly consistent with that. And I mean, a lot of customers, we are getting AI inquiries now. People want to strategize around AI. They don't even understand what AI really means to me. Okay, everybody wants a piece of AI. But at least the inquiries are slightly more informed. Obviously, nobody wants to talk about ERP anymore. What is ERP? Why do you need that? Everybody wants AI. And Robert, your comment related to fax machines. I'm completely okay with fax machines as long as they are going to be AI native, because we all should be talking about AI native in 2026.
Why do you think that? Because I agree with you.
AI native EDI. That's where we're going, right?
I mean, nobody's going to rank you if you are not AI native, Robert. I mean, Google is not going to like you. AI native is not going to like you. So what's the point? I mean, let's change ourselves and become AI native. Quickly about me, I guess, Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ, and also host of the WBS Rocks podcast. So over to you, Robert.
Well, we got a great set of announcements to go over, and it's kind of interesting. You mentioned ERP. I just think it's kind of the elephant in the room, and not a lot of people talk about it. But all the things we're going to talk about today intertwine with ERP, and how data management intertwines, how data protection intertwines, how sustainability, which is this first subject, but they all some ways and somehow will intertwine. And when we get to the end of the show, I think we should talk a little bit about our predictions, but I think there's a lot of things that will be focused on platforms versus features and capabilities, where the platforms work together, where ERP will be prevalent, but these data management platforms will be a big deal as well. So let's talk a little bit about Avetta, introducing a new ESG social desktop audit. So that's to help with assurances of social responsibility. So they introduced this, and it's under one platform. It gives customers some scalability, digital way to assess their suppliers, which I think is a big deal for risk. There could be things that deal with labor and even child labor and unsafe working conditions. This moves them a little bit deeper into the social responsibility, diligence, and regulatory compliances, specifically across supply chains as well. So who would like to weigh in on this first? Donald or Michael or Ken, what do you think?
Oh, I mean, I can weigh in. My New Year's resolution was not to be the grumpy analyst again, and that's lasted like for 5 minutes of this call, hasn't it? Because I mean, I look at this. I don't get me wrong. I think it's very well intentioned, but what is it more than just a questionnaire platform? I'm not sure that it's anything more than a questionnaire platform that they're really announcing. And I suppose, in a sense, the IP is their analysis of what the questions need to be that you need to answer. So you're sort of signing up to Avetta's view of this is what ESG is, and this is how you should be thinking about it, and these are the kind of questions you're going to answer. But I'm not sure that there's a lot of substance here beyond a questionnaire platform that's a little bit more scalable than a paper questionnaire, and a particular view of ESG. And I don't mean that in any way to downplay the importance of the subject area, but I don't think the announcement's announcing much. Is that fair? Is that a terrible start?
To me, that's fair. I mean, I when I looked through it, I kind of came to the same conclusion. Like it's an audit template or a set of audit templates. Maybe not that it's not an important topic, because I think it is, and I think it's ripe for automation and a lot of advancement that could be done there. It's going to be really important. It can get you in a lot of trouble really quickly if you don't do it right. So, but I had kind of mixed feelings about that one too.
Think about what it does for the customers, though, and work your way backwards. It gives those procurement and ESG teams a risk rating, and I think that's a helpful thing. But it's probably over, emphasized here. But at the same time, that risk rating could be a positive thing here. Ken,
being able to put a number to something is always valuable,
Right.
for people. Even if it's only valuable in the sense that it makes people feel they're doing something. I feel I've got at least I've now got a benchmark at which I can tell. Being able to make comparisons is really important. All analysis at some point is a form of comparison. So how are we doing compared to others in our industry? How are we doing compared to where we were last year? That the ability to do that comparison does require something like this. So it is valuable from that point of view. That's why I'm a little, I don't want to be too hard on it. It's just I don't feel they're announcing much of substance, but the subject area is super important.
Okay,
Ken,
Ken, you want to go first? Ken, I don't think we can hear you. If you are talking, maybe you are on mute.
Sorry about that. I muted so I didn't have background noise coming through. The thing that I think about this, which I've been seeing a lot in the different things that we're looking at with the different releases, is that for me, this is more of a continuation of what we've seen throughout 2025, is where we're looking at providers who are taking and now trying to AI things that they're already doing. And I don't think that's a bad place to start. But I do believe that from a mechanical perspective, that we're going to have to stop looking at it from start moving to where we're seeing AI being used as a foundational technology, a foundation capability that now can be used across a number of different applications and domains, so that the promise of what we're referring to generically as agentic now starts to actually come into view, where it's now I'm not dependent upon a particular vendor doing something in order to be able to get value from it, but I can now get access to that data, start using it, and start bringing real change into organizations, where it does not necessarily require the organization itself to necessarily have to go whole hog on one particular approach, but rather continue the trend around experimenting and developing AI native capability in their organization, like upgrading people and what they need to do to understand and be able to take and leverage this technology as we move forward into 26.
I love the fact that Ken introduced the concept of AI as a transitive verb. We're going to AI things that we're already doing. That use of AI as a kind of verb, I think, is actually is very good, because that's almost exactly the conversation I had with people just now. Is how do we AI this? We're already doing this. How do we AI it? And it's a very awkward verb to use, but you can see what people are thinking about. How do we apply AI in these scenarios? And what can it do for us? And how do we just take something that's currently repetitive and make it, dynamic? It's super interesting.
Yep. Sam, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so some very interesting themes here, and I'm not familiar with these guys. I don't know if you guys have tracked them before. I don't know whether they are in Europe, which is where ESG is very high. And I always wonder, I mean, where ESG stands as of today, because I don't know whether you have caught up with the announcement of the US withdrawing from I don't know how many different international organizations. So, so I don't know where the ESG stands overall. This mandate comes from policy, from governments. So I don't know who's going to care for this anymore. Europe generally cares for this one a lot more. And I don't even know why they need to care for it, because, if everybody is going to make mistakes, I don't know if Europe is going to survive, to be completely honest. Okay, so that's how my, positioning is from the ESG perspective. But overall, Donald, to your comment related to this being just a questionnaire, in general, when you are dealing with government, it's pretty bad. It's really, really bad. And you have no idea how much reporting you need to do and how much data reconciliation that you need to do to be able to report. And if you're looking for a number for this, and I mean, $1 million is nothing in terms of ESG penalties that we are talking about, especially for the bigger organization. And these things could be fairly sensitive when you are talking about things such as your forced labor and child labor. And then the whole world is probably going to be watching you in terms of what you are doing. And in some countries, especially if you have your supply chain where nobody knows where everybody's supply chain is, if you are going to be present in countries like Bangladesh, if you are getting your apparel, or maybe Taiwan, then you are going to be questioned where you are getting your materials from, and this becomes extremely tricky to be able to assess that. So that's where I would say it's far more critical than most people think. And with AI native, I would think that AI agents would be able to do a lot more. But when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to supply chain, it's very hard, because you have geopolitical constraints as well. It's not as easy as setting up technology infrastructure. So those will be my thoughts.
You raised a very important question that you kind of implicitly answered yourself, which was, well, who cares about this? And if the current administration doesn't care about ESG, who does care? Why should we care? And the same thing happens, by the way, with DEI. I mean, the current administration doesn't just care; it's actually positively anti-DEI. And yet, who cares? Why do companies still do it? Because their shareholders care, because their investors ask about it, because their employees ask about it, and their customers ask about it. It's not just a governance and compliance checkpoint. It actually it matters to consumers, and it matters to investors. That's ultimately what drives this, much more than compliance, regulatory compliance.
It's a big brand risk. You're right, and the consumers in general react to that really aggressively, no matter what the regulatory environment is. So I think that's a great point.
I love Donald's comment on this, because I think that the power of the wallet is one of the most powerful tools that both consumers, from both an individual consumer as well as from a corporate perspective, have to be able to exert. And I'm all for that, for sure.
I think it's a bigger conversation. It deals with how you're going to handle sustainability from where the product comes from. Also, the sustainability carbon emissions that is being used at the same time. I think it's going to, at some point, be mandated for certain suppliers to be at certain levels of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 in the selection process of how you have vendors that are executing your supply chain. I don't think it's going to go away. I think you're naive if you, not you all, but companies are naive if they think it's not going to go away. I think even ERP companies are, beefing up their systems that have green modules to help with what I'm talking about. But I see it going even as far as when EDI was mandated for payment and purchasing all through the procurement with Walmart. If you didn't have this platform, you weren't going to be ordered from or paid from. I think sustainability will be at that level at some point in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Not to deviate from this conversation, but anybody have a comment on that?
I'd like to take that in a little bit farther, Robert. So from a mechanical perspective, one of the first things I did when way back when I was talking about green IT was, and a lot of people were talking about strictly environmental impact, but the way that I was approaching it was from the perspective of, if we consider that greening actually has an economic benefit, you would look about things a little bit differently, because it's, again, not about compliance and conformance, but rather it's about that there's a business benefit associated with this. And the thing I like about that, I think, is a harmonic in this conversation, is around there is the cost of doing the right thing, like you're delivering results and value for your shareholders and for your customers by doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And I think part of that is about being able to understand the cost of being able to deliver or provision products and services. And that if you're taking this from an environmental and social responsibility, like the cost of power, we know the cost of power is going to go up. And if you just treat it as though, oh, there's plenty of power and it's cheap, well, great. That's an assumption that you're building into whatever your product is. And that assumption could come back to bite you at some point. So looking at it from the perspective of, how can we now be more thoughtful about the resources we consume, has a direct impact not only on the broader environmental concerns, but our operating concerns about, is this actually something we can cost effectively provide to our consumers and not blow their expectations by having to go and reset it later and then charge significantly higher prices. So that's the way I'm looking at this.
Okay.
It was well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to the next story, Robert, or?
Yeah, unless anybody has anything to say. But I think that was some good feedback. I think it's a bigger conversation, Ken, and I think what we're all saying are along the same lines. But let's go to BillingPlatform. So they've enhanced its revenue cycle platform with some new features, right? And whether we like these or not, or if they're powerful enough to make it more than just an announcement from marketing, but they've added some contract metric reporting, using AI generated descriptions to break down complex logic. So helping with this workflow visualization. And I think that's important when the numbers and the content need to be put together to have some conclusions. I think the platform is able to help the customers a little bit. So these tools are designed to provide finance and RevOps teams with a little bit better picture. So what do we think? Is this something that companies will take advantage of? Is this something that is more fluff and marketing than something key to the industry?
I mean, I think this year is going to be about about use cases when you talk about AI, right? I mean, it's becoming more and more. Looking across my business, which workflows really could be automated, should be automated, and underneath that. And one of the things I really liked about this is that stressing, compliance, stressing transparency, stressing governance as you go into these automations, especially in financials, back office. I think it's a big opportunity if it's done right, but it's also a big risk if it's not done right. But I think it seems like a timely way to start the conversation around some of these other processes. And some of the surveys we did last year, you could see coding has certainly been driven by AI platforms, and customer experience has had a lot of AI. But when you move back into financials and legal and even HR to some extent, it's been much less over the last few years. So this year, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And I thought that played well in there, especially around the auditability and traceability.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sam, what do you think? Or, go ahead.
Ken, do you guys want to go first?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I went off track of how I usually do it.
Go ahead.
Well,
Don?
Sorry,
yeah, I mean,
Don.
I'm happy to say this is one of these announcements that it makes me want to see it. I want to see this in action now.
Yep.
I think it's very intriguing. So workflow visualization, for example, is I've seen a lot of attempts over the years to do workflow visualization, and it tends to fail in both directions. Either it grossly oversimplifies the workflow so that it becomes just a kind of high level boxes and arrows sketch that isn't really very useful, or it gets into so much detail that it's impossible to kind of work with, because you can't do what you need with a visualization, which is you can't glimpse something and examine it for more detail and get a sense of orientation, because there's just too much detail there. So I'd love to see how they handle this, because I think AI does offer an opportunity for adaptive workflow, and where visualization could be very, very valuable if they get it right. So this is one of these announcements. This is interesting, but I want to see it. I want to see it in action. So I think I'm going to follow up with them and see if I can actually.
What do you guys think
action.
fits in the technology stack?
I don't know what's behind the stack right now. I think there's some really interesting work they're doing around APIs here for integration, which I'd love to know more about. And if you think of it in terms of what the billing infrastructure stack is in general, it's all about APIs. I mean, these applications are all about integrations. They should come down to relatively simple workflow and many complex integrations. So I'd love to know a bit more about it, how that's actually working. But I suspect that's what the stack looks like. There's a workflow engine, and there's just a ton of integrations to make this work.
Yeah. So, guys, this is very interesting. And I don't know about this category, revenue cycle management. When you look at this, I think this is going to fall more towards the CPQ category, is where I would position this. And obviously that has become really thick as well. Generally, this is going to be relevant in service-centric industries. For the most part, SaaS is where the major play is for something like this. But then you have other usage-based, subscription-based billing scenarios, and scenarios where you are going to have ASC 606 requirement from the revenue recognition perspective. That's where you are going to use something like this. Now, they are talking about AI descriptions for formulas and workflows. Generally, that kind of capability is going to be slightly more relevant into CPM, FP&A, SNOP slightly category. They do overlap a little bit, I would say, with the SNOP category. In this particular case, they are going to have a little bit of CLM component, and the formulas, when you look at this, they get very complex. And this was one of the major pain point, I would say, for a lot of companies. And that's where I guess you are going to see real value from the AI native workflows perspective. So I'm personally very excited about what they are doing. I don't track BillingPlatform as closely, I would say. So I don't know how big they are as such. But for the most part, I'm personally very excited in what they are doing right now.
Okay. Any other comments?
No. Next story.
Okay. So BlackLine acquiring WiseLayer. So BlackLine agreed to acquire WiseLayer, not WiseLiner, WiseLayer, to embed AI agents into its office of its platform, which is a CFO kind of platform, targeting automation, lots of the tasks that they're doing to help with this. So they're bringing WiseLayer AI digital workforce technology that can read policies and historical data, content, and generate more of a structured finance workflow. So this should, I think, offload some repetitive tasks for customers and produce more standard narratives for them. I think it does help differentiate BlackLine's platform against some of their competitors. What do we all think? Is this a positive story? Does this help? It seems like it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I could almost say the same things we said about the last story too, right? This is another area that is a really obvious place to see automation move this year. I think there's a need. It looks like from the announcement, I haven't looked at it, and I don't follow them that closely. Not necessarily my first area, but I thought it was an interesting one. And again, back to auditability, transparency. If you go into this from a financial standpoint, you want to, just like billing financials, I want to make sure I can be compliant, but at the same time, a lot of opportunity to automate workflow processes here. And it seems like a good thing from a customer perspective.
Well said.
Yeah.
Ken or Donald?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to jump in. I really like BlackLine. I think they're one of the company I follow fairly closely, and I'm very I use them a lot as an example of the power of automation, because effectively what they do is RPA for the office of the CFO. And if you've ever worked in a company where it's such a misery kind of closing the books at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, closing the books, it's like, oh no, we can't do anything until we've closed the books. We hear this from the finance department all the time. And with their RPA platform, effectively with BlackLine, the books are always closed. The books are always reconciled and closed. Every time there's a new invoice, every time there's a new payment, everything is reconciled. And I often compare this to, I compare it to the difference between a still photograph and a movie. A still photograph, you just look at it, you get another photograph. A movie is just a sequence of still photographs. But it's moving so quickly that you get the impression of movement. And with BlackLine and with RPA in general, what you actually get is something that was fairly static now becomes very dynamic. And that changes your attitude. It changes your attitude towards treasury, changes your attitude towards billing, changes your attitude towards credit control. So it's much more than just automating a system. The automation unlocks a great deal. But there's a problem in that automation, RPA in particular, relies almost entirely on making decisions which are deterministic. So long as you can run through this workflow and all the decisions are deterministic, then bang, you can automate it. And even in finance, it doesn't turn out that way. Finance turns out that there is, how do I categorize? How do I allocate this? Turns out to be a question of judgment sometimes. And so the RPA works really well, but in almost every case, there's some point at which a human has to intervene and make a human judgment. And those human judgments are essentially, they're drawing on human experience to make a decision. And so what they're really doing now, BlackLine with WiseLayer, is they're trying to now automate that human judgment process. So in the hope that they can now make this movie run even more smoothly. I'm very enthusiastic about this, but the big question, the really difficult question to answer is, will people trust it enough? Right now, it's that point that you run through the RPA, it's deterministic. Oh, here's a difficult problem. We need a human being to sign off on this. Will they be happy? Will they trust that they can put the system to audit, that they are audit ready if these decisions have been made by an agent? And that's not a technical question. That's a very human question about, will people be able to trust this enough to put it into production and consider themselves audit ready if they're running this? BlackLine have got a lot of experience, so I think we should be fairly positive about their possibility of doing this. But I think this is fascinating, and I'm kind of excited to see it.
Great. Ken?
I can't add anything beyond what Donald has talked about.
Okay.
Great comments.
Good comments. Thank you. Sam,
You see, if that was the first story, I'd have started out the year really well.
Yeah, you're gradually getting there, but the jury's still out. We'll see where we're at when we conclude, though. Thank you, Donald. I'm teasing you. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, so Donald had some very interesting bits there, so I'm simply going to build up on that. So overall, I guess, as far as my understanding goes, from the market alignment perspective, BlackLine may use RPA technology because their category is slightly more aligned to a market where RPA is going to make more sense. But as such, they might not be the RPA vendor. Okay, so their market alignment is going to be into treasury software. My understanding is that they are enterprise grade treasury software. That is the category that they are trying to attack. Again, RPA is just the enabler. And obviously, everybody is using RPA in some shape or form, most of the enterprise software vendors. Now, when you look at BlackLine, and Robert, I don't know whether you remember this or not, and Michael, I think you have been in a lot of different sessions as well. We have covered BlackLine, previous stories, and we have covered very similar stories as well. Now, this category is very interesting when you look at this more from the AI native lenses. Because AI native, when you look at the transactional category at this point of time, you look at FP&A, you look at ERP, they all seem to be very integration friendly. Okay, this category existed because ERPs were extremely difficult from the integration perspective. Now, there is a political element here as well. Okay, a lot of banks, what they are doing is with their bank account, because they have zero differentiation with their offering. So now what they are doing is they are offering a treasury software. You go to Bank of America, you go to Chase, they all have very sophisticated cash forecasting, treasury offering, and obviously their goal is going to be stick to Bank of America, don't go anywhere else, because that's how politics works, right? So you have forces coming from there, from the real financial institution, and they are trying to safeguard this as much as possible. Then you have other AI native vendors, and they are saying that, hey, you don't need FP&A anymore. You probably don't need treasury software. Why do you need this? You don't need AR automation. You don't need AP automation. Okay, we can do everything right now. Within 24 hours, we can build it for you from scratch. So this is going to be very interesting. I don't know where this category is going to go, to be completely honest. But treasury is a very interesting category. There are some AI native vendors as well. But BlackLine definitely has some real threat, and whatever they are doing from the AI native perspective, and that could be the reason why they had to acquire this, because they have to survive the market.
Right. It does strengthen them, so that's a good point. All right, well, let's go over to Propel Software's launching DesignHub. This is, I guess this is a pretty interesting one too, because of their multi-CAD integration capability, connecting mechanical, electrical CAD tools to their PLM. So it's synchronizing the parts, the bill of materials, design changes into one workflow. I think that's pretty important for manufacturers with just different fragmented systems, data sets, CAD environments into a more of a modern cloud PLM. And I think it's important to notice that I think it's forming a nice platform, for their customers, which I see as a kind of a consistent strategy that companies are doing. What do you all think about this?
I mean, I'll jump in for a second, because I sort of go back to one of my previous lives when I built and ran global consulting at Autodesk. And I can tell you, with my consultants on the ground, this was an issue all the time. That whole idea of multi-CAD and synchronization and, ECAD, MCAD, mechatronics was one of the things we were talking about back then. All of those things from a synchronization design perspective are huge issues and can be, multi-millions of dollars of problems if you don't solve it. So when I read this, I'm excited. I think that's a very good area that needs a lot of support and work, and it would be a big thing from a manufacturer perspective. So it seemed like a really good positive announcement to me. If it works, I haven't seen it, but it seems like a much needed solution.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Well, for me, this has a pretty high cool factor. I'm kind of geeking out over it myself. And quite frankly, I would like to, if we think about design from a more broader perspective, it'd be interesting to see how the design patterns and the approach can be applied in other domains. And that's one of the things I find really exciting and compelling about it.
Yeah. In this particular case, guys, and Michael, you are right, and you probably have a lot more background. Number one, with Salesforce and Propel, they are sort of the ISV on Salesforce, as far as my understanding goes. As well as I think you do have a little bit more engineering background as well. And I think, Robert, you have done something there as well, right? So here, one thing that I always wondered, who's going to use PLM inside Salesforce? I don't know a mechanical engineering organization that is going to be comfortable using this inside Salesforce. And that was my biggest problem with something like Propel. Okay. But now I think I have slightly better appreciation, I would say, in terms of what they are trying to do and where they are taking this. And they are doing the multi-CAD integration, and multi-CAD is a real problem. If you go to any engineering organization, Michael, obviously your alignment was with AutoCAD. So at that time, you only cared for AutoCAD. You don't want anybody else to get in your deals. I get it.
Well, and Inventor and Revit and, all those other additional solutions that we did that probably added to the problem. Probably solved the problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, back in the days, everything was very isolated, right? So
Yeah.
you didn't require, let's say, 90,000 CAD tools just to design one assembly or one device, right?
Yep.
Things changed, I would say. Every single device that you have in the market, machine you have, they are going to have mechanical component, electrical component, now AI inside that, and you have to design all of that together. And that's where I guess, even if you are going to have very sophisticated CAD tool, it's probably not going to work for you. Okay, so that's where you require multi-CAD, functionality, and the PLM that is going to be slightly more agnostic. That would make sense.
Yeah.
So here they have introduced the DesignHub. Now, I don't know how design friendly that is going to be. I would think that designers are going to see this as more of the back office, which is completely cool. But at least they are able to use their own choice of CAD software, which is where I personally see the value of this. And probably Propel is going to have the real shot in this. And I think people will appreciate because in Salesforce ecosystem, you have CRM and a lot of other tools that they have in the portfolio. They are probably going to tie together well, which is going to be a need for something like this.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, that's a good point, and I think the part that most people don't think about unless you've been inside design organizations is the number of and type of tools that you use, and a designer works in a type of tool that doesn't translate into CAD, and the engineers work in tools that are CAD, and if it's a complex product that has electrical components, mechanical components, electronics, all those things, those are not all done in one system.
Yep.
So there's got to be we go back to our old system of record thing, right? There's got to be a place where that data comes together and is clean. And any of these other things that we build on top of them, whether it's automation, AI, agents, all those things, unless you've got that data clean in the back, none of the other stuff is going to work right. So when I looked at this, I applaud the idea, because definitely it is a problem. And if this works as it seems to be designed, then yay! It's definitely something that's needed.
Yeah.
Great.
This is an area I don't know much about, but there's a small local manufacturer that I know through the local chamber of commerce. And when this story came up, I kind of, when you shared it, I thought, well, I'll ask them, because surely this problem must be solved, because it's such an obvious problem. Everybody must have it. So I said to them, well, what do you think of this story? I mean, isn't this problem solved? And they said, oh yeah, that's problem solved, absolutely. Unfortunately, it's solved in the head of one person, and if she leaves, we're stuck. We can't do anything. It's been solved in wetware, not in software. So they were actually
it's human-led integration.
Yeah. So I learned a lot from
human native integration.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right. Well, let's keep the ball rolling. We got a time for maybe one or two more, Sam. We'll see how we go here with Zencoder. They are launching their Zenflow, which is a desktop application that turns AI assistant coding into more of a structured workflow, which I think is pretty interesting, because you could take it and it's kind of like a co-pilot, I guess, and it goes from the AI agents, plan, implement, test, review the changes, and then move forward with these binding these technical specs and agents together, and modifying code for that. I think this helps the customers enforce more of a consistent pattern. And I think, like, we go back to the data. If the data is really good, I think it allows you to do things like this. If the data is not good, you're going to have some major problems. But it could really speed up and give code quality, if it really a good perspective on helping clients. What do you all think about this? I'm assuming you guys all like it, but let's see what you got.
Yeah. I mean, it is
I'll bring a contrarian.
Go ahead, Ken. No, go ahead.
I'll bring a little bit of a contrarian viewpoint to this one. So for the most part, the thing I don't like about it is that there's a lot of work being done on spec-driven development. And I think it's actually highlighting a real issue, because for the most part, when you think about vibe coding, people don't give a lot of thought to how they prompt and then the resulting code set that gets generated. So thinking about spec-driven development is actually, I think, a good kind of step up, but really it's only a partial step. I think it hits it too late in the life cycle in order to be able to really make a tangible difference. We need to move it backwards from the specification and consider all the other inputs that
Yeah,
are needed in
information.
order to be able to, develop the application itself or whatever the thing is you're trying to build. So this is, in my mind, this is like with the state of the art, this is an also ran.
I mean, it's definitely an area that needs help, and it's the survey stuff we did last year, that was the number one use case in the U.S. was coding, so it's out there, and it definitely is an area that's ripe for some major improvement, and I think you're right, Ken. It sounds good to go like, oh, I'm going to go vibe code my whole new application suite, but that's probably not the best way to to think through this as you're trying to approach it. So,
yeah, but Ken, what do you think the positives are? So it sounds like you think it's a little too late in the life cycle. But what is it doing in that life cycle part that you like?
Well, I think the thing it actually is doing is it's drawing attention to the fact that by just using a simple prompt or even a more moderately complex prompt, you're looking at it across the different LLMs that do your code generation, and you're getting different results. This is not like a compiler where I put something in and I know the output that I'm going to get. I can run the same prompt twice on the same engine and actually get different outputs. So getting it more granular so that you can actually look at the feature or the capability that you want to build and do a better job with your specifications, that gets you closer in terms of, well, there's probably going to be a consistent set of patterns that can be used to produce that particular piece of functionality. But it still doesn't go far enough if we don't actually describe all of the constraints and the related things that go into what shapes how that should be built. Because are we clear that what is getting built is going to be the right thing? We still need a lot of help on that area, but that it kind of raises the level of visibility amongst people who are doing this kind of work, and now a really better awareness of how they need to think differently about what they're doing, and giving better tools to people that don't necessarily have development background. I think those are both good things.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Ben's making a fantastic point there. Not what you've got on screen, but if you actually dig into the press release, one of the things that Zencoder say is that they suggested they could get a kind of 20% improvement in code correctness, as they called it, which was an interesting phrase, code correctness, as opposed to say code quality. So correctness being that it runs, deploys, doesn't need to be reconfigured or whatever. But actually, and then they don't give much validation of where that 20% comes from, and they admit that it could be higher or lower. And it struck me that that's actually not a particularly good number, that 20% improvement. I would rather put the effort into improving the quality of spec, therefore being sure, in Ken's terms, that we build what's needed, rather than we build something that is not well spec'd, but is 20% more correct in terms of its coding. So I kind of feel that they have they've hit a very large nail, not quite on the head, and that's not. I just don't feel this is going to be helpful enough to make a difference. I certainly don't think it's enough to move the industry from vibe coding to AI-led engineering, as they call it. That just seems like a language game rather than something substantial.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of competing approaches when it comes to spec-driven development. So it's not as though we've got a consistent viewpoint across the spectrum of developers to be able to say, oh, we know how to take and address this now. So I don't have a lot of confidence that they've come up with oh yeah, this is now the way that everybody should be managing specifications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Ken had some very interesting points there in his commentary. And here, when I look at this, and I always wondered when I look at this whole AI generated code, and I'm going to provide you an example of my interaction with one of my cybersecurity friend. Obviously, he's very good. And I asked him, okay, how do you feel about the world, from the cybersecurity perspective? And he's like, don't ask me, okay? Because we have too much code in the world. We have too many devices. We are putting, code pretty much everywhere. And I am not cool with that. And he had this, I would say cynical view, I guess, of the world, that you never know how many holes we are leaving there, for the attackers. And this is the same thing. Now we are generating this, the whole vibe code and slop is a term that is being used here. So there is no sort of engineering that actually goes in. AI, in my mind, when I use it personally, okay, sometimes it's great. Sometimes it actually creates more work, to be completely honest, because now you have to do these cycles, even for content creation. Sometimes you get it in first attempt, but it depends upon AI's mood. At that point of time, okay, how AI is thinking. And that's where the real risk is. So that's where I see value, and depending upon the marketing copy, from the marketing perspective, the way they have positioned, this looks great. But how much they are able to do from the real engineering perspective, how much they are able to control, is going to be a question. If they are able to do that, that's a big deal in my mind.
Good points.
More
All right, let's should we tackle one quick one here, and we'll wrap up. So Anaplan introduces role-based AI agents for finance, supply chain, sales, workforce planning, along with their code modeler agent that can build, adapt planning modules. I think this is pretty interesting as well. We'll see what you guys say, but the goal for them is to move AI more to the center of use for their scenario planning and their decision workflows. So does this help customers? Is this marketing? Why does this matter?
I mean, one of the biggest trends this year is going to be that specialization, right? More agents broken into smaller pieces, more specialization. So from that perspective, that seems right on trend with what we're seeing across. That's one thing, and I think the other is these are processes that are ripe for this type of use case. And honestly, I've started to think more and more about this as a data foundation, the enterprise apps in the middle, the agentic almost UX at this point, and a collaboration layer. And if you start to think of it, that flow, the agents really do have to get more and more workflow focused and specific for it to really work effectively as more and more organizations start to transition and use more agents across their business. So that part I like. I mean, it's still, there's still like, what's the orchestration piece? Is governance built in? What does that look like? I had more questions here too, but when I look at it, I think, this seems right on trend with what I'm seeing across the board. So
Yep. Good. What else we have? Ken, what do you think? Ken or Donald?
I'll follow up on Michael's comments. I think that the whole idea of tightly coupling things to roles and specific scenarios and use cases is actually quite useful, because you're both constraining the behavior as well as reducing the amount of context required in order to be able to get something useful out of it, and can now be you can do a better job of evaluating whether or not the agent did the thing you were expecting it to do. Yep. And the way that I see it is, rather than a lot of the approaches, what we've been seeing over the past year, which is building these monolithic super agents that know everything, being able to be more task focused, and then thinking about this as, and this is part, I'm going to telegraph a bit of a punch of what I'm thinking about for the remainder of 26, is that a more fabric-based approach to how we build and consume these agents and how we get them to work together. So it looks more like a fabric rather than, I have a thing that does something well, but how do I now get it as part of a team where the team works well together and has those elements of orchestration and workflow that Michael was mentioning.
Yeah. Well, and the more you can split this up, because one of the other issues that we're going to have to deal with this year is the fact that agents have amnesia. They only get the context in this one sort of isolated way. They don't actually capture everything they've done and remember that and learn from it. We talk about this a lot, like, the agents are learning. They're not learning until we have a way to capture all of that and let them learn from it. is not going to work. And if you're trying to do this in one broad, massive general agent, the problem just is exponentially harder. So to me, this fits that, starts to address that problem as well. A lot more questions for them around this, but that's definitely a plus.
So from my perspective, I guess this is a very interesting story. And I don't think I have seen similar stories from the other FP&A sort of SNOP vendors. Anaplan, the way they are positioned in the market, they would be more of the connected analytics is how they like to position. So that's going to be the combination of, again, FP&A, SNOP, HR analytics, anything and everything that goes inside the analytics workload. But now with AI native, I think people are sort of arguing that we are going to break all of those layers that were there inside ERP. We don't need all of those layers. And what that means is you can shove all of this data inside that. And now you can do conversational reporting as well. So the question is going to be, okay, do we even need something like this? Do we need FP&A? Do we need SNOP? Are we going to retrieve all of this from the ERP perspective and going to shove pretty much whatever data, whatever junk we have, going to shove inside ERP? That's a possibility. If that is, okay, what is going to happen to these vendors? But there are AI native FP&A vendors as well. So I don't know. But this is a very interesting announcement that they are able to do this. And I think this is where the real power is of AI agents in my mind. Because they don't have the same constraints that they are going to have, from the ERP, CRM-centric workloads perspective.
Yeah, from my point of view, I really like the role-based focus of this. I think of scenario planning, though. I wonder, what role the agent is really going to play here. Is it to help the human scenario planner with scenario modeling, or is it actually going to help to expand the range of scenario ideation? Which is, and these two problems are. I mean, they're closely related, clearly, but a lot of the problems I see with scenario planning is that people get so hung up on the modeling of a scenario, the accurate modeling of a scenario, that the ideation is often, fairly poor. And you would hope that AI could enable better ideation as well as better modeling. And if it can do that, I think it can make a big difference and become an essential tool for scenario planning. But if it's only helping with more accurate modeling, I'm not sure that is going to solve that problem that Sam was mentioning, that you could do this in the ERP. Increasingly, you do it in the ERP.
And so sounds like you don't need those analysts anymore, Donald. That's going to be the role of agents. So I don't know what is going to happen to those people now.
Well, let's give our predictions for the one prediction real quick for the end of this show, and then we'll carry it on to next week at Sam, what you just said, hopefully, if we need to. But I think you were kind of joking a little bit. But anyway, Ken, one prediction for the end of the show here. What do we got?
So I'm actually looking for more work around being able to use AI code generation to build more glue, more integration work, as opposed to necessarily building discrete components and applications, which will actually help with that whole idea of agentic fabrics that I was speaking about earlier.
Okay.
I mean, I think what I hit on the what I hit on the memory issue is the one, right? To me, that's a big change. And we've kind of gone down this sort of context with RAG and versions of, retrieval augmented generation, but we're conflating context with memory, and they aren't the same thing. And now we're finally starting to see evolution that says some of these systems can solve the agent memory problem and that will actually dramatically change the effectiveness of those agents as we roll out more and more of them. So.
Right. Donald, what do you got?
Yeah, for me, I'd like to touch on something that Sam briefly mentioned, which is that agentic AI effectively delivered within ERP systems is dramatically going to change the landscape for the vendors who live in the surrounding ecosystem around the ERP vendors. They're going to find their lives change dramatically when agentic AI within the ERP becomes effective and takes on many of the tasks that they currently do.
Didn't we talk about this like 6 months ago and you said I was wrong? You said that, so you have to apologize to me. But I'm going to push you guys a little bit, and because I wrote an article about that, about event-driven agentic AI ERP, and Sam's like, "You're wet; they're years away." But I'm going to call it ERP 5.0, which I think is representing the next generation of ERP, integrating all these technologies that you're talking about, integrating the human-centric component, specific concepts from Industry 5.0, and making it the next generation, as you're saying, more complete and aligning to what I would call the ERP 5.0 is my prediction. But I'm seeing also these systems be more platforms, and the platforms are speaking to other platforms. So the customers don't necessarily care about the features and capabilities. They care about tools that these platforms have to run their business, and then SaaS applications and et cetera. So Sam, what do you think after you apologize?
I have to do that. That was my New Year resolution, I guess, Sorry, Robert. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So my prediction for this would be AI native or die. Okay. Everything has to be AI native, and not just from the marketing copy perspective. You need to change your business model. Business model has to be AI native. In fact, I guess even Driven in Forbes can be AI native as well. Even Driven is not as AI native, Robert, in my mind. So that needs to change as well. My apology.
I'm rooting for Toronto Blue Jays and the Maple Leafs this year. So
they are super AI native this year. I'm telling you that.
The Raptors, not so much.
Raptors are doing well as well, by the way.
Okay. There you go. Anyways, you want to wrap up?
Guys. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap. Hey guys, so thank you so much for joining. So now we are meeting every Friday. This was the first episode of the new year. We are going to bring more stories next week. So stay tuned. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.